1. I seem to have the misfortune of dealing with law enforcement with what seems to be disturbing regularity. However, this is not one of those times. This time, the guest got shut down by the cops simply because my hotel is playing host to a law enforcement motorcycle club's summer conference. Tonight, we are completely sold out, as I'm sure you've probably figured out, but we all know that doesn't stop the unobtainium-level guests from acting like spoiled children when they're told that we don't have any rooms at all for them. I walked my sleep-deprived butt in for my usual audit shift tonight, and was greeted by many people wearing leather vests and patches, as well as some of our local officers, both uniformed, who were required to be there since alcohol is being served, and off-duty, who the club had invited to stop by and partake of the festivities, as long as they were off-duty. I found out that my 82-room property is completely sold out, and I only had one more arrival left. My late arrival had called and cancelled shortly after I clocked in, but I let them go ahead without a cancellation fee because they were totally sweet to me, and I knew I could have that room filled in about 30 seconds, which I did about a minute later. Midnight comes, I run my audit, and the club is starting to wind down. Coming back inside from their beer tent. Yes, they actually have a beer tent set up in our overflowing parking lot, along with a DJ, and a few of them are camping out in my lobby with a few of the local officers trading war stories. Sounds like a pretty good night, doesn't it? I thought so too, until the subject of this tale comes waltzing into my lobby. Just as I had finished getting my audit packet together and filed away, when a guest enters the hotel and approaches the desk. "Hi, I'd like to book a room for this evening." "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we are completely sold out tonight. If you'd like, I can call." "That's impossible. I checked the app right before I came in." "Once again, I'm very sorry, ma'am, but as it's after midnight, the app is showing the rooms we'll have available for check-in today at 4 p.m. I would be more than happy. I'm a lifetime Sparkly Stone member, and I'm guaranteed a room." "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. Sparkly Stone members, lifetime or not, are indeed guaranteed a room, as long as the reservation is made 48 hours in advance through the Sparkly Stone service line. As everyone is checked in and has been here for a while now, I simply don't have a room available for you. I am more than willing to..." I see Officer Awesome, one of the local uniformed officers, stand up and start to make his way over to the desk, when she hits me with the line we all know is coming. Though this is the first time someone has said it in my presence. "I don't care! I need a room now! Make one of them leave and give me their room!" Just then, Officer Awesome lets out a gruff, "Ma'am." Angry Snowflake whirls around and is ready to lay into him, until she notices Officer Awesome is a 6-foot-tall, uniformed police officer who is built like Hugh Jackman in Logan. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Awesome with TPD. This gentleman has told you that they do not have any rooms available. Now you can either quiet down and see if maybe he can find you a room elsewhere, leave and find something on your own, or I can cite you for public disturbance and escort you off the property. What would you like to do?" Angry Snowflake, now devoid of all color, stood there for a few seconds, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She finally shut her mouth and scurried out into the night, to go be some other poor auditor's problem. Officer Awesome nods as I thank him, and he goes and sits back down. The night is dark and full of weirdos, except for this weekend. I have a feeling this weekend is going to be pretty good. 2. I've worked front desk for close on 30 years. The hotel I work at is a smaller independent, 90-plus room venue with a condensed staff base. And the hotel has just ceased operating 24 hours a day in favor of a limited hours reception desk. One of the night staff can be a nightmare to work with an erratic temper. He has frightened a couple of our female staff and had some in tears with allegations of their ineptitude. And he holds a solid belief that the place would fall apart without him. He is the one who keeps things going, his words. The reality is customers avoid interacting with him as he can be odd. He doesn't carry out a lot of the cleaning side of his job because he's basically lazy. He naps most of the night and famously was discovered having set up a booby trap to make noise and wake him up before being caught out. He refuses to have his mobile phone listed as he doesn't believe we need to contact him outside of work hours, which means the times he slept in and didn't turn up for his shift, we couldn't call him so we could go home, and had to call the manager instead. Generally non-helpful stuff. And definitely not a team player, as he had largely operated without discipline or upper-level management interference for over 10 years. He was more than capable of doing the bits of the job he liked, but he had over the years fixated on his way of doing things to the point it was impossible to get him to change his procedures without wanting to bang your head against the wall. Plus, he didn't know nearly as much as he thought he did. To be honest, we were quietly looking forward to him being told he now no longer had a position. It turns out he's barely used any of his leave up over all those years, and they blanched at the thought of the big payout. So they presented him with the position of full-time front office receptionist to slide into. This guy thinks he's been busy at night, but he has no idea what he's in for. Juggling multiple phone calls, internet drop-ins, arrivals, late checkouts, processing bonds, balancing takings, small maintenance issues, recoding doors, delivering hire items, and heaps more. All throughout a mostly non-stop 8-hour shift, with a half-hour break all day. We are pretty certain he won't be able to get up to speed, but he has been given the chance to see if he can do it. Now, being that we've only just literally stopped our extended desk hours, there have been a few extra jobs each side of the night audit shift that the morning and evening shifts have had to pick up. New jobs means we're all running a little slower with unfamiliar duties, so we already have enough on our plates. We rely heavily on each other to continue good communication directly, and by use of our system tools to provide a seamless stay for guests. We aren't the newest of hotels, so our reputation leans heavily on friendliness, convenience, fast service, good food, low prices, and clean and comfortable facilities. He's gone home for the night after a quick shift changeover and report, and I'm at the helm. For the first 2 days of his new shift I had worked with him, but now he was on his own, as in theory he had worked at the hotel long enough, again over 10 years, to know the booking system thoroughly. Turns out there were a lot of commands he had never had to use, such as how to book in a guest service to indicate a microwave was required in the room, or that the king bed needed to be split into 2 singles, or breakfast was included, etc. So I explained to him at length how and when it's used, and got the "yeah, no worries" from him, indicating he understood enough. Less than an hour after he has departed, a lovely family of 4 arrives. Their children are very young, and everyone is tired but still relatively good-natured. I check them in, we have a small friendly natter to set them at ease, and they head off. A few minutes later, Mum comes back downstairs and she looks upset. "What's wrong?" I ask in my most soothing, caring tone. "I specifically called earlier today and said I needed the 2 singles and the sofa bed made up. I told the man." My heart sinks. I'm on the desk on my own, and the only other staff on at this time of day is the food services staff. A team of 4, including the chef and kitchen hand. I can't move the family to another room, there isn't any appropriate, and I'm not prepared to tell them to make do when they had called early enough for their request to be actioned. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll duck up there and fix that for you while you're at dinner, will that work?" She is instantly relieved and agrees to let me know when the room is free so I can remake the beds. Nearly half an hour later, during which time I'd moved furniture around, pulled beds apart, located new sheets, etc., and even moved a really bloody heavy microwave into another room. I'm overheated, I've broken a nail, stained my arms from trying to carry too much at once down long corridors, and am worn out. After all, this was my 7th day straight after waking at 4:30 a.m. a few mornings in a row, then swapping the next day to midnight finishes. The customer is happy, and I'm happy, albeit very annoyed that the man had not followed up on the guest's requests and advised housekeeping of the arrival's needs. The rest of the night I'm getting slammed, door keys not working, towels needed, milk, tissues, checking first-time guests in, which always takes longer. I check in a family of 5, then go to have my dinner, but get called back to the desk not even 5 minutes later. The father of the family of 5 is standing at the desk looking annoyed. "I called yesterday and told the man we needed the split king and open sofa bed, plus was supposed to be in adjoining rooms, with the interconnecting doors opened up." I die a little. I tell the guests I can't do a sofa bed because there aren't any adjoining rooms left with sofa beds. But I can't split the king and bring in a rollaway bed and move one of their rooms to the other side of one of the rooms they already have. So the interconnecting door can be opened. He agrees to letting me have access to the rooms to fix them up while they go out for dinner. And that's my meal break gone. I drag myself back downstairs once finished, another broken nail, hungry and tired. One of the bar staff tell me room 18 needs toilet paper. But we don't have a room 18 in-house. Some investigating later, and turns out the man had swapped rooms due to a maintenance issue, but left the old keycard attached to the sign-in registration sheet. So the guests had gone into a room with a broken item, moved them to their proper room as they apologized for the mistake. Gotta love Australians. And then discovered the man had continued with his streak of not checking rooms into the system once they'd signed the paperwork and received their room keys. He'd done it with 4 rooms the previous night too, which was why room meal charges weren't going through. By this stage, I was hugely behind schedule, and I still had 2 pages of arrivals the next day to assign rooms to and charge their payments for, with just under an hour to go and still the day's takings to collate and enter, banking to write up, bin security runs back up, lock up, and report to night security company to send. I got out the door an hour and a half after my rostered time. A part of me knows this is all unfamiliar ground for him, and that I need to be understanding of his errors as he learns. However, there is no way in hell he would ever make a bed if one of us forgot to enter the guest service, so he'll never learn to be more careful, nor will he bother to be. I'm still hoping that he'll quit as it's all too much for him. 3. We all know those weekends. Sports teams in-house, kids running around everywhere, parents drinking wantonly without regard to what their little demons are doing. Every single room needing something at 10:30 at night. All in all, a dumpster fire in progress. Well, about 10 p.m. to 10:15 p.m., I received several complaints from my business guests that there were kids running up and down the halls. Being fucking rude-ass shit monsters, all the usual. I have already, at this point, been yelling at kids for 2 days to stop running in my halls. I believe my exact phrasing was, "Stop running in my halls, my hotel is not a playground!" Inevitably, I go down twice, stop the kids, come back to a new call, and the 3rd time I go down the hall, there are 3 kids goofing off with a soccer ball or something. I beckon them to follow me, and we all go out onto the patio where the adults have opted to camp out with their bag toss game and beer-filled coolers. There are a solid 30 to 50 adults out there, ignoring their goddamn kids. Now, to set the scene that's about to unfold, 2 days previously my son came home from his last day of school acting out. We, being my significant other and I, noticed as he was sitting on a chair he had some pretty dark spots along his thighs. She starts asking him about them. Since the day prior, my ex texted me asking if we could extend her grounding since he broke some rule and was generally acting out. Come to find out, she let her boyfriend, a 6'1" monster of a shitlord, take a belt to my child's back, ass and legs. Side note, I'm not opposed to physical discipline per se, I just refrain from doing it, and never with anything that can be construed as a weapon. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've spanked my child in the last 2 years. And it's real small. And I never let my partner do what is my responsibility. Ever. I spent the morning after finding that out before work, filing a DCFS report, filling out paperwork to get an EOP against his mom and her boyfriend, and then spending the first 6 hours I was supposed to be at work in the ER with a kid that doesn't want to be there. He's upset. And another kid died that same night just down the hall from our exam room. It was a terrible night, and everything sucked. I pride myself somewhat on being an orator, being able to project, not yell, having honed this over many years as a lifeguard in retail, hospitality, and years of speech and public speaking. So these kids are tearing around my hotel, and their parents are ignoring them to drink heavily, and play what is somewhat affectionately known to some as cornhole. I march these kids out to the patio and proceed to project, loudly, to every single parent there, "Hey everyone, listen up. I've been telling your kids for 2 days to stop treating my halls as a playground. You need to keep your kids monitored. If you cannot do that, you will be asked to leave, and you will not be refunded. It is not my job to babysit your children, and they cannot be bothering my guests as they have been. I will not tolerate this anymore tonight. Am I clear? Good. Have a good night." Yes, you heard that correctly. I didn't give them any chance to actually answer my question. I finished up and went back to my desk inside. My significant other was waiting for me to get off work so we could go home. My son was with his grandma, my mom, so she's just there watching this happen. A gentleman, loosely defined, comes up to the desk, literally stumbling drunk, and proceeds to attempt to berate me for calling them out on their behavior, telling me I can't talk to them that way, they're paying customers, blah blah blah. All the usual bull. Calls me unprofessional, which breaks the metaphorical camel's back. I tell him that it's unprofessional for them not to follow the code of conduct their coach, coordinator, whomever, signed by allowing their kids to disrupt my other guests. He ignores me and tells me that he's going to complain to the head person, and stumbles off into the night. A few minutes later, another, more sober but not totally sober gentleman comes to my desk. I steel myself for the inevitable ABBAB, always be berating and belittling, coming, and he very calmly, very genially says that he's sorry for his kids, they're dicks, and he's going to go yell at them now to stop being dicks. But he wants to know what to do after the official quiet hours begins. I.e., can they still have their speakers playing music? Can they still congregate out there, etc., etc., etc.? I explained that I haven't received any complaints about the patio, just about the halls, but after 10:30 p.m., if they could quiet it down a bit and mellow out, I didn't care, as long as I stopped getting complaints regarding noise from rooms. He thanks me, shakes my hand, and heads back outside. Remember how I told the story of what I was personally going through with my son? This is why it's important. The nice drunk guy comes back out about 10 minutes later and says, kind of hushed, but definitely seriously, "So I heard from some of the parents, their kids are saying that you put your hands on them." At this point I laugh because this is just how my night is going. I explain, no. In my entire career of customer relations, the only time I put my hands on kids is when to rescue them as a lifeguard. I don't even really believe in putting hands on my own child, and he tests my patience more than most people do. And I give a brief rundown of what I'm dealing with at home, and if that was the case, I would never have filed a DCFS case. He apologizes and leaves the desk. I don't see him for the rest of the night. I of course fill my GM and other pertinent staff in on the drama unfolding on property. Come Monday, my GM has cancelled their contract for the following year, and explained to the head doodah that their team is no longer welcome, until they can guarantee that their kids won't disturb other guests. 4. Once upon a time there was this hotel, the very same one where a few months ago this same night auditor almost had to get the police involved and give everyone a bad time. See, the night auditor had a colleague, another fellow auditor of the night, which meant he got to take a lovely 1-hour break every night, so he could nap and rest his eyes as to better audit everything. And this happened while he was on the most glorious nap ever. It was interrupted by the noise of people talking, quite loudly in fact, in the front desk. Realizing this might just be one of those times a nightbird came in without proper ID, he quickly went back to sleep, since he was on break and quite confident in his colleague's ability to deal with the situation. Returning from his break some 40 minutes later, ready to audit some more, he asked his colleague, "Hey, what exactly was all that noise around 2:40 a.m.? To which he was informed that a group of nightbirds had descended upon the hotel with 2 foreign guests, looking for a suitable nest with which to engage in activities of the flesh in exchange for currency. However, all was not well, since one of the nightbirds, as the auditor had guessed, did not have her ID, and as such could not be let into the hotel. Surely this was no big deal. She could take the cab back to whatever house of ill repute she spawned from, get her ID and return. but she had a much more, shall we say, nefarious plan in place. While the night auditor who was on duty at the front desk turned his back to take a photocopy of the IDs of that flock of sinful birds, this particular night bird, who also happened to be the shortest in that parade of outfits that did not cover all, sneaked off to the stairwell and made her way up to the 4th floor, where she hid out of sight from the cameras. Not realizing this, the night auditor at the front desk gave them back their IDs and set them on their way to whatever unholy acts they were about to consummate. All was well until he began to receive noise complaints, not 1, not 2, but 3. Unfortunately, protocol requires he go up to check the noise complaints, and so he came upon room 401. He knocked, but the door didn't open. In fact, the harpies inside the room insisted that the guests do not open the door, and merely replied that they would make less noise. However complicated that might be when one is engaged upon whatever acts of debauchery were being carried out, this seemed to intrigue the night auditor, who, upon returning to the front desk, looked at the security footage of the front desk around the time of the arrival of the 2 guests and their unsightly succubi associates. With the type of vision only someone who works in the dark has, he spied a little rogue sneaking off to the stairwell just next to the poorly lit corner of the front desk. He frantically searched where she had hidden and realized she went up to the 4th floor and hid in a corner waiting for the arrival of her unholy companions and their prey. Not knowing what to do, he figured he might as well do nothing until his slightly more experienced mentor returned from his slumber. Returning from his slumber, our hero asked his colleague who was holding down the fort, "Hey, what exactly was all that noise around 2:40 a.m.? And the answer sent a shiver through his spine, for he was no fool. They both could lose their jobs and a severe chewing out by the demonic lords of management, rulers of this dark keep and bearers of all reason. In a quick decision, he decided to work his way up to room 401 and ask, politely at first, that the undocumented fiend leave the room. Surely if she wanted, he could call her a cab, so she could go back to wherever it is she came from. But alas, his demands were met with anger.
"Oh, but are you going to pay for her taxi?"
"You can't do this, we're working. We'll sue for lost wages."
"There's no such law saying she needs ID to get in here, so we don't have to,"
sang the leader of this pack of harpies. While this was happening, one of the lesser but still angered birds muttered that it didn't matter, their taxi was already on the way. After 2 or 3 minutes of being met with expletives, the night auditor realized there wasn't much he could do, and his colleague was already receiving noise complaints at the front desk. So he hatched a cunning plan. Seeing as in the midst of the ruckus one of the night birds mentioned they had to be back at the house of ill repute from whence they came at 4 a.m., and even mentioned the name of this house, one that our hero was quite familiar with, in fact, had a friendly reputation with the house's overlord, so he could take his phone call, and such was done. The overlord was less than thrilled, in fact, perhaps very displeased with the overall situation, and asked the night auditor to inform the succubi that they were to speak to him as soon as they arrived in his realm. While this played out, a taxi arrived, just as prophesied by one of the night birds, and they came down to the front desk. Since he could not do much else, our hero warned them that in the future, if their colleague did not have ID, none of them would be let into the hotel, and if any of them dare even try pull a sneaky on him or his colleague, he would be contacting the local constable so that they might expunge these wretched creatures from the hotel. This drove the nightbirds into a frenzy, not because of the threats of constabulary action, but rather because he had angered their overlord, who would surely put them to sit in timeout for a while to atone for their carelessness in not having an ID, and also jeopardizing his minions' capacity to conduct business in this particular hotel. More noise complaints began, and when it was clear they were going to take a bit too long to enter, their carriage headed back off into the dark night. The night auditor made a daring move by pretending to call the police. The mere mention of the words, "Good night, officer, I'm having a problem with," was enough to panic the beasts and have them scatter, vanish into the night. After this was done, the night auditor was angry at his slightly less experienced colleague and told him to expect a phone call from the demon manager of the front desk early in the morning or afternoon, and that they would both have to seek forgiveness from the demon lords of management. With nothing else to be done, and having relieved his colleague, the night auditor set about thoroughly recording these events in the black logbook of the front desk, while sipping a magical potion of coffee as dark and bitter as his ex's heart. The demon overlords, through their messenger, the devil, front desk manager, have decided that the night auditors need to present themselves to the super devil, hotel director, precisely at 8 a.m. tomorrow for an audience about the circumstances involving the harpies. Apparently, the super devil was not pleased at all the way things happened, not only because of our hero's companion allowing someone to enter a room without proper ID, but also because all 4 succubi and their prey entered a single room, so 6 people in a room. The slightly more experienced night auditor is glad that 90% of the events unfolded while he was on break, and as such, might escape the unholy wrath of the super devil with relatively few punishments for his mistakes. As for his squire, alas, we can only wonder as to what fate awaits him for his transgressions. The devil assured the night auditor that nothing significantly grave happened to ensure their banishment from this dark keep. However, unsurprisingly, the night auditor was not convinced, and has already begun to suffer for the events that transpired in that fateful night. Anxiety and fear denying him any sort of respite from the wretched daylight through sleep deprivation. And so it was that the night auditor and his squire stayed beyond their normal shift to speak with the super devil regarding their transgressions. The super devil, however, was not alone. Another devil, a lesser demon, the bearer of flames, ruler of pots and pans, and lord of all things restaurante-related, the restaurant manager, asked to sit in, as there is also matters of food to be discussed. The super devil began by asking how long were the auditors working with the hotel, and surprised by how little time they were. In his memory, they had been there for a long, long time. While he was greatly displeased with the events that transpired, he was mostly displeased with the less experienced night auditor taking too long to catch on to things, and with the more experienced one exposing himself to corporeal harm by attempting to remedy the situation directly. In accordance with the hellish curses that bind and maintain order in the hospitality industry, and this particular hotel, the super devil then rewrote the laws of old and created a new ritual to be followed.
No guest shall bring nightbirds into the hotel. If said nightbird does not have valid ID, the nightbirds will be required to sign the copy of their ID, along with the guest whom they are visiting. If the guest refuses to sign, the nightbirds will not be allowed into the hotel. This same procedure shall be followed for all sorts of visitors, both during the day and during the night.
Pleased with this new ritual, he very clearly instructed the night auditors that should this ritual be broken in any manner, by guest or night bird alike, they were to cast upon whomever disrespected this ritual a curse most nefarious, of summoning a demon enforcer, security guard, to assist them, and should they be unable to complete the ritual of summoning or the demon enforcer found themselves incapable of appearing, they should cast an even darker curse of lights and sirens and men in blue, who would then banish the guests and their visitors from the dark keep. Having survived this demonic conclave, the night auditors swiftly made their way to the employee entrance, clocked out, and quickly left the premises so as not to expose themselves to the ravages of sunlight. 5. A little bit of background before I get to story time. At this point in my life, I was only 14. I was saving up for a pair of Doc Martens I'd seen in our local mall, and frankly my $20 a week wasn't cutting it. So I took an off-the-books job working at a little motel in the tourist-trapped town known as South Jersey. Now, if I can be serious for a moment, allow me to say this. You can bag on a state you don't live in all you want. I know New Jersey was once the butt of most jokes when it came down to all of the states in the Union at one point. Hell, that asinine TV show on MTV certainly didn't help matters. but having lived there for the majority of my young life, I can say I truly understand why there is a reason a good portion of the locals detest tourists. This is where the story begins. My mother and I made the arrangement that I would be staying with a very close friend while working this summer job. This is going to be 4 days a week plus holidays and weekends. My first day on the job was truly one from hell. A bunch of spring breakers from Connecticut came to the Jersey Shore in order to party like a bunch of crazed zoo animals and cause random mischief and headaches on the local boardwalk. I disembarked from the tram car at the end of the boardwalk and made my way to the hotel, completely oblivious to what awaited me. So I entered the management office and introduced myself to my new boss, who will remain nameless because of the fact that I'm still friends with his son, who verified to me his dad works with YouTube playing various narrators' channels in the background. I also refused to name the hotel. For one, it's under new ownership, and two, I'm not really one to stir the pot. He introduces himself to me, and upon shaking his hand, I could see the look of abhorrent stress in his eyes. He eyes down my outfit and says, "No big deal or anything, but Trish, my friend's mom and the head of cleaning ladies, was supposed to tell you to wear something old. Those jeans are in pretty good shape, and that Guns N' Roses t-shirt is practically new. I got some sweatpants that might fit you, and you might want to put this on." He hands me a shirt that was reminiscent of hospital scrubs, a pair of rubber gloves that went up to my elbow, and a painter's mask. Oh yes, that was my first indicator as to how this day was going to go. I changed my clothes, put on the mask and gloves, and met Trish at the top floor. She looked like she'd been chain-smoking and fighting back levels of anger that I'd never previously seen in her. And she was a single mother of 3 boys. "If you quit as soon as you walked into this room, I would not blame you," was the first thing out of her mouth. No good morning, not "Wow, you're early," those words. I walk into the set of an attempted Grindhouse film gone wrong. Beer bottles littered the floor, 2 of the mirrors had been taken off of the walls, and were caked in what I now understand to be cocaine residue. Used condoms were stapled to random areas of the room, and both beds were so badly covered in various, almost unidentifiable fresh stains, they had to be thrown out later that day. I hadn't even gotten to the bathroom. Entering the room in question, I found the mirror and medicine cabinet had been smashed. When I pulled back the shower curtain, I instantly went gaunt. There were stains on the front and back walls of the shower that pretty much indicated that whoever was in there was on their hands and knees while simultaneously emitting from both ends. It was smeared everywhere, and due to the fact that I was wearing the painter's mask upon entering the room, I thankfully could not smell a thing. Still, I stepped outside of the room to regroup. As I'm walking over to the deck chair to sit down, my foot taps one of those 3-foot-tall cylindrical hollow ashtrays.
"Whoa, hon, be careful of those."
I hear Trish shout rather suddenly. I froze and watched as she pointed, making the universal yuck face. Looking down at the ashtray, I could see it had been turned upside down and filled to the brim with vomit and God knows what else. I nodded and silently thanked her as I heard the voice coming up the steps behind me.
"So did the new kid tap out?"
I heard my boss ask Trish. She looked at me and awaited my answer. "No, I need the money. I'm not going anywhere." I guess I defied their expectations. The look on their faces was priceless. I hunkered down and proceeded to grab the mop bucket, bleach, and mop. I then make my way to the bathroom. The way I saw it, despite its nastiness, it was the easiest to clean. I knock it out in 15 minutes with the aid of the toilet brush. I walked back down to the room to see my boss taking pictures of the damage. He didn't bother with the bathroom because, strangely, that wasn't the first time something along those lines happened in his hotel. I got curious and asked him what he was doing.
"Taking pictures of this madness so I have photographic evidence to back up every red cent. I'm going to charge these assholes for damages."
Trish bent down and attempted to pick up one of the mirrors, and my boss stopped her immediately.
"Don't touch that. As a matter of fact, everybody leave this room and focus on some of the smaller messes. I feel like I might have to get the police involved here. I want this pristine."
So from that point on to a little bit later on in the day, I washed windows, emptied ashtrays, the normal stuff. It was all normal until I was informed that the pool is closed until it was cleaned. I grabbed the pool skimmer, and one of the other cleaning ladies stopped me before I reached the gate.
"Honey, you ain't gonna need that,"
she said while handing me a snorkel. I get into the pool area to find nearly 24 beer bottles in various areas of the pool. I went back to Trish's car and borrowed a pair of hot pink women's baseball shorts she had sitting in the back. I then began my descent into the murky brine. It took me a good 40 minutes to get all the beer bottles out. A couple of them were stuck in the suction and therefore hard to pull to the surface. We had to close the pool for a week after that. As it turns out, one of the beer bottles had broken against the side of the pool when it was thrown, and a ton of glass got sucked into the filter. I'm drying off, I'm grabbing my sweatpants, when I hear my boss scream, "Son of a motherfucking bitch!" from the open office door. As it turns out, the night desk clerk was the one who signed those rowdy tenants in. They had written a rubber check that bounced so hard it damn near went into orbit. To make matters better, the checks from that particular book had been stolen, and the night manager openly ignored the cash or credit only policy posted on the wall behind the front counter. Needless to say, after the assessment for the damages came in, close to $7,000, she was out of a job. Despite what everybody thought, I stuck it out until early August. I was still a kid after all, and I still wanted to enjoy a bit of my summer break. As far as my first day was concerned, my boss had only planned on paying me $50 for the day. After everything I went through, he literally pulled $300 out of his pocket and told me I earned it. Icing on the cake? The local mall I spoke of earlier was right on the boardwalk. Needless to say, I bought my Brett the Hitman Hart-style docks that night, and had enough to spare for some pizza, rides, and arcade time. Damn right, boss. I earned it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Coahw number 24. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, after a bit of inconvenience earlier in the week, the second paper shredder I ordered actually arrived today, just as I was starting to record, which is nice. I haven't tested it yet. I'm assuming they actually sent me one. They sent me a box for a paper shredder, and there was something in it, so we'll see. And I have been informed that it's not normal to be excited about a paper shredder, but you know what? It's a new toy for the office-related stuff that goes with doing what I do. Too often it's a matter of, oh, right, that's, right, I'll have to keep that, oh, but that might be junk mail, that is junk mail, right, I'll put that in the paper recycling bin. So you put it to the side to do it, and it kind of piles up. So if I've got the shredder, I can just pop things straight in there when I know I don't need them, and then just dump the contents in maybe, I don't know, once a week or every couple of days, depending how much rubbish I have. So that's the idea. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.